Hey folks, and welcome back. Joshua here. In today's video, what I'd like to cover are the main excuses that I hear that keep us from actualizing our fullest potential. These are the things that we do that keep us from doing all the things that we say that we actually want to do, but we don't wind up doing them. So I'm not going to talk about those things that we want to do, whether it's being more creative, being a better husband or boyfriend or whatever. I'm going to talk about those things that keep us from being those things. Stay tuned. All right, number one, oh my gosh, number one is the hugest excuse that I hear in counseling, in my personal life, on the internet, and it's no time. Man, think about how oftentimes you have either heard that or used that excuse for not getting something done. Well, I just don't have any time. Now, it's my personal belief that one of the reasons why it's so popular is because everyone uses it and no one questions it. So what I want you to do is to question it. So I've got a little activity for you. I've got an example here on my piece of paper and I want to share it with you. So I'm going to throw out some numbers here and we'll just get started. So the whole point of this is to create a time management budget. Now we think of budgets in regards to money, but the problem is we don't see time as the resource that it is. And since we don't see it as that resource, very oftentimes it gets squandered. So the process is very simple. What you do is you just break down, like you would a monetary budget, the time you spend doing particular things. And I've kind of created a mock-up just to help us out. So in a regular week, there is 168 hours in a week. And this is how I've broken it down. Now, here's the thing. This is going to be very different depending on your lifestyle and what you've got going on in your life. So I just came up with a very generic one, but it still fits. So, on average, the average adult person should be sleeping around 8 hours a night. That comes to 56 hours in a week. Next is work, and this is going to vary as well, but what I wrote down is 40-hour work week plus 5 extra hours for commuting. Now, some of the stuff, some of the research I found says that the average work week has actually increased from 40 to 40 plus, but I'm not really so sure that that really fits for everyone. It still seems that at least half the people that are in the workforce are working 40 hours or less a week, but again, you adjust how you want to. Cooking, eating, now this one's interesting, I had to kind of make this one up, 21 hours in a week eating and drinking. Chores, 2 hours a week. Now what that breaks down to a week is 20 minutes a day. I'm wondering if you actually do that much in a given day. Don't know. Family time. Now family time is all of that time including bedtimes and getting kids ready for school and getting them ready for whatever, and also that enjoyment that we have when we're going out to parties, to whatever. So this time's going to fluctuate as well, but I put 12 hours for that. I also included personal hygiene time and I added 7 hours. That's an hour a day. So keep in mind with all of these numbers, I was very, very conservative, right? There's a very good chance that a lot of these areas will have much less. But anyway, all told, in 160 hours in a week, all of that time adds up to be 136 hours, which leads to 25 free hours in a week. That breaks down to more than 2 hours a day. That's pretty impressive, right? Actually, well, geez, that's 3 times 7 is 21, more than 3 hours a day. I didn't do my math well. Now, where might all those extra hours be going? Well, I did a little bit more research and I found this to be very interesting. Take this for the grain of salt that it is, because I found this on the internet. I don't know how accurate it is. But I found that the average amount of hours per week that people spend emailing, texting, and other social media, 23 hours a week. Pretty impressive. The more impressive one is for TV, 35 hours in a given week. That's 5 hours a day. Now, if you added those two with all the other things that I mentioned, we're clearly way over the 168 cap that we started with. So clearly stuff is giving. Now, where I found that a lot of stuff gives is in the area of personal health and hygiene and support for your own mental well-being. So that looks like not eating well, not sleeping well, and certainly not exercising. So I challenge you to sit down and do this time management budget to see how much extra free time you've got and where it's going to, and then see whether or not you can't afford 15 minutes a day to go for a nice walk. Number 2 is no energy. Now this one's very interesting because it follows directly from number 1. So what I didn't say about number 1 is very oftentimes when we are in that place that we're saying that we don't have the time for this or that, what we emotionally create is a sense of urgency and overwhelm. And so what you'll find out is you've got way more extra time than you've realized, and it's going to Facebook or the internet or whatever it happens to be. And then also with that, you feel as though you have no energy. Now, energy is a very interesting thing, and the word energy can cover all kinds of things. I oftentimes use the word to talk about emotions. It could clearly be used to talk about that mental or physical impetus to do something. So here what I'm referring to when I say energy is a number of things. I'm referring to the willpower to do something, the desire to do something, the motivation to do something, right? So by that, I mean the energy in physical body and in mind and focus to be able to get stuff done. So when we say we have no energy, what very oftentimes is happening is that we aren't creating the energy that we need to get stuff done. Now that's the interesting thing, is we can only have the energy that we've created. There are 3 main ways that we create energy. That's eating, sleeping, and exercise. So like I said, the average adult needs to be sleeping around 8 hours a day. Most of my clients I've found are actually under that. Now there's a good chance that if you have suffered from depression in the past or currently, you're sleeping above that. And so I've found a lot of wiggle room there. Diet, I'm not going to even get into specifics because there's a ridiculous amount of information out there. But suffice it to say, if you're not eating in a healthy manner, then you're sabotaging your energy. Now, what you need to eat is really going to be very concomitant upon what kind of lifestyle you lead and what kind of stuff you like to eat, basically. There are a lot of healthy alternatives to the stuff that we're eating that isn't healthy, and it requires you to look into that. Finally is exercise. Exercise, and I love this. So science has just recently determined that 10 minutes a day of high intensity training is equivalent to an hour or so of low level or moderate exercise. So it's starting to get much more difficult to come up with excuses as to why we can't exercise for 10 minutes a day. So if we're not eating well, not sleeping well, and not exercising, we're not creating the energy that we need to do the things that we say we need. Now, one other big point that zaps our energy is telling ourselves nasty, horrible untruths. But that'll get to number 3. All right, I sum up number 3 as this: no ability. So what I mean by no ability is getting into that nasty trash talk that tells us that we're not strong enough, we're not smart enough, we can't do whatever it is that we want to do. So let's say you want to start getting in better physical shape and you want to start exercising. So you're sitting on the couch, eating potato chips, watching your TV program, and you say, I want to get in shape. So first and foremost, and I've talked about this in other videos, your goal is not specific. Getting into shape really doesn't say at all what it is that you want to accomplish. Versus, I want to get up off this couch and walk for 30 minutes. That's much more specific. So the no ability comes in the form of telling ourselves stories that we in fact aren't testing. This is what goes on. We tell ourselves something like, I can't run a 5K, or I'm not strong enough to lift weights, or I don't have time to do X, Y, or Z. And then we don't test that story against what really is. So that no ability very oftentimes leads to a sense of shame, disappointment, and frustration. So I may have talked about this before. There's something called learned helplessness. The idea of learned helplessness is that at an early age, we can be told certain messages from our parents, our caregivers, like you're stupid, you're no good, you're bad, you're wrong. And we start to believe that to be true. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that we hear this message, we start living as though it's the truth, and then we actualize that truth by not challenging ourselves. Well, I was at the store yesterday and I came up with a new phrase. Rather than learned helplessness like when we are children, we actually create self-taught helplessness. Kind of pleased with that. We teach ourselves by the language we tell ourselves that we're incapable of doing something. Now the thing is with any given goal, any given skill, it requires us to set small, manageable goals and then do them. So you want to run a 5K, what might that look like? That might look like putting your shoes on and walking for 10 minutes. If you want to eat healthy, what that might look like is instead of having a burger, you have a salad. Simple, small, measurable things that can be done. But notice what I'm talking about, comparing what it is we tell ourselves with what it is that we do. What it is we say versus what we do, there's almost always a discrepancy. There's this gap. And in that gap, we breed discontent. We breed malcontent and shame for our own selves. Because we say we want this wholesome, lovely, awesome thing, and then we see ourselves, observing ourselves doing something just the opposite. So this can be a big killer because we keep ourselves stuck by telling ourselves whatever we tell ourselves and not testing it out. All right, number 4 is a bit like number 3, but it's slightly different. What I call it are self-identified failings. Now, it comes from number 3, and these self-identified failings build themselves on beliefs that basically say something like, I'm too blank. I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too stupid, I'm too whatever. These statements, which again come from number 3, this self-talk, lets us start believing that we just simply have no ability to do what it is that we want to do. So the way to understand this section is going back to number 3, when we tell ourselves that we can't do something over time, it leads to this section number 4 about not believing it as a fact. Now these two sections are the main places in which we start breeding depression and anxiety. The depression is that story that tells ourselves that we can't do something, that we're not able to do something, that we are in fact powerless and helpless to change. And also with that, we have the anxiety that comes with knowing that we can be better, or maybe we're supposed to be better. Now, of course, in these two sections, we haven't defined what better is. We don't know what it is. And yet we keep telling ourselves, I should be better. But you know what? I'm too stupid. I'm too lazy. I'm too whatever. In this place is the root of our frustration. It's the root of our discontent. Because unfortunately, what we tell ourselves, we find evidence to back up. So that's the ironic thing, is we could find evidence to back up the fact that we are good at challenging ourselves, that we're able to cook a healthy breakfast for our family. It could be anything. But we actually have to make the steps to make it happen. All right, the 5th and final section is a summation of all of the other 4 and its own section. And it's this, focusing on what is not. So let's go over. No time, no energy, no abilities, complete failing in some way, shape, or form, adding up to focusing on what is not. There's been a big push just recently on focusing on gratefulness. Being grateful for the things that we have in our lives. That's great, but it fails to recognize that what we need to be grateful for are the actual skills and abilities that we wish to have in our life. When we stay stuck in number 5 and stay focused on what we do not have, we're constantly reinforcing that we're not good enough. Good enough for whatever. Good enough for our family, good enough for our friends, good enough for this world. When we stay focused on what's lacking, what happens mentally is we're focusing on the past and we're focusing on the future, and we're completely ignoring the present moment. It is actually in the present moment that we create that measurable, sustainable goal for ourselves. And so you see the pattern with all of these is to tell ourselves an untruth based on storytelling, based on actual mental concepts rather than visceral felt experience in the here and now. Doing 5 push-ups right now, vastly different than telling yourself, I can't do any push-ups, I'm not strong enough. The big culmination with this is we very much are what we tell ourselves. I like the adage that we are what we eat. Well, we're also what we tell ourselves, perhaps even more so. So in summation, one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself is to test out these convictions that you have no time, no energy, you're failing at something, whatever it happens to be. Test it out. Go find something in this world to do to see whether or not whether you're correct or not. And then you'll really start seeing just how much your thoughts have limited your actions. Go out, go do it, go see what you can do. Take care.